of chapter 1, Mishnah Beis, Mishnah 2. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Elazar ben Azariah said, Ein oisnes ha'ama betchila b'mayid u'b'shvius. As we mentioned before, things that take a lot of effort, we're not allowed to do on Chol Hamoed, even if it's to prevent loss. So now, the Mishnah gives the following example. The sage Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, Ein oisnes ha'ama betchila. One cannot dig a new irrigation canal. You're digging. You're digging a new irrigation canal. An irrigation canal was called an amma because in those days, typically, an irrigation canal was 1 amma deep and 1 amma wide. That was the typical measure. An amma is, let's call it around, I don't know, between 1.5 feet and 2 feet. That was the typical size of it, and therefore they called it an amma. But that's the word used for an irrigation canal. So ein ois an amma betchila means you can't dig a new irrigation canal. Why? A lot of effort involved in that, understandably. But it also says, Elazar ben Azariah says, you also cannot do it during Shemitah. Now, yesterday we learned that during Shemitah, there's no issue of effort. There's not a problem with effort. So why does Elazar ben Azariah say that you can't dig a new canal during Shemitah either? And the answer is because the problem is that people might think that instead of digging a canal, which is just bringing water in, you are going to be hoeing. Hoeing is a kind of digging that is done to aid the growth of plants. You dig up the ground. You dig it up. And that helps them grow. So therefore, Rabbi Azariah says that by Shemitah, the issue is not the effort involved, but people who see you digging that canal are going to think you're hoeing. And hoeing you cannot do during Shemitah because that's helping growth. Now, the Chachamim say, they describe Elazar ben Azariah regarding making a new irrigation canal during Shemitah. They say you could. And they're not concerned that people are going to think that you're hoeing because when you make a canal, you do something very differently than when you hoe. When you make a canal, you dig out the dirt. And what do you do with the dirt? Move it over. When you hoe, you're digging up the dirt in place. So it's a very different act. And therefore, the Chachamim say, we're not concerned that people are going to think that you're hoeing, and therefore, to dig a new irrigation canal during Shemitah is not a problem. But they do agree with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that you can't dig a new one during Chol Hamoed. That takes a lot of effort. And therefore, they say, but you can repair the damaged one during Chol Hamoed. The damaged ones you would be able to repair. And that's because to repair the damaged ones, to repair the damaged canals, because basically you've got, let's say, dirt fell into it. So you dig it out. It's not such a big deal. And therefore, that you're allowed to do on Chol Hamoed. Okay. Next. The next thing we're going to go into is a category called another type of malacha that is permissible on Chol Hamoed. And this is a type of work that's permissible on Chol Hamoed, even if it took a lot of effort to do. And even if it's not necessarily, we'll see a difference soon, but even if it's not necessarily a need for the holiday itself, for the yontif itself. Nonetheless, if it falls under the category of tzarchei rabim, a public need. A public need is something that the sages said we're allowed to do on Chol Hamoed, because during Chol Hamoed, people aren't so busy. And the public needs, they relied on volunteers. And therefore, people are more able to volunteer for these things, for these public needs during Chol Hamoed. If you're going to go ahead and you're going to wait, for after Yontif to do these public needs, then the people aren't going to be available because after Chol Hamoed they're going back to regular work, and therefore there was the Chachamim allowed this kind of tzarchei rabim, this kind of work to be done.
Public works.
This public works, very good, to be done during Chol Hamoed. Okay, now, so now the Mishnah reads, "Umesaknes kalkulei hamayim shebershus harabim v'chaytinaysan." We can repair damaged cisterns, which are underground tanks used to collect rainwater for drinking, that are in the public domain. Okay, Why did these cisterns have to be fixed? So they bring down here in the notes. If a cistern is cracked, dirt and sewage from nearby sewage pipes will enter the public drinking supply. So definitely something that needs to be done. So therefore, to fix them, the ones that are in the public domain, and to dig them out. If, let's say, rocks and stuff get in, and you need to clean it out, you could do that. You can do that during Chol Hamoed also. These are all examples of as Barry said, public works. Umisaknin es haderachim, ve'es harachayves. You can repair the wide roads. Rachayves derachim are wide roads. Rachayves are narrow streets. Ve'es mikvahs hamayim, and the mikvahs of water, the gatherings of water. They explain down here, if a public mikvah requires cleaning, we may clean it. Additionally, if it contains less than a minimum amount of water, we can fill it up to the necessary level. All these things are going to be permissible to be done because they are public needs. Now, v'aisin kol tzarchei harabim. This is translated to mean v'aisin kol tzarchei harabim, that you can do all the public needs. Public needs means like this. Even work that meets a public need is subject to certain restrictions. It may not be done in a professional manner, which is called ma'isa uman, unless it is required for the yontif itself. So here we have a new principle. That again, that even where we have public need, which we said is permitted to be done on Chol Hamoed, it cannot be done as a ma'isa uman. It cannot be done in a professional manner, unless you need it for yontif itself. So since cisterns must be dug in a professional manner, this work is permitted only if the public will need the water on yontif. That's the way it is. When you're dealing with digging a cistern, that's going to be needed. That already that's a ma'isa uman, that's a professional act, and therefore that is going to only be permissible even as a public need if the public needs it on yontif. In the Mishnah's previous cases, which is repairing old cisterns, roads, and mikvahs, the work is permitted even if not needed for Yom Tif because it can be done in a non-professional manner, Ma'aseh Hedyot. So this part of the Mishnah that said they do all the public needs, that means that for instance, let's say you need to dig a cistern, okay? Then the halacha is that you can do it. However, what you need to know is if you're going to do it, has to have a need for yontif itself, because certain things like digging a cistern needs to be done by a professional, and therefore that's only permissible even for the public needs if the public needs it for yontif. The examples that we had before, fixing the cistern, fixing the roads, fixing the mikvahs, those are all can be done in a non-professional manner, which is called ma'aseh hedyot, and therefore those can be done even if there is no yontif need. Next. Umetzainin es hakavaris means that we can mark graves on Chol Hamoed to warn passersby of their presence. Meaning, if you, let's say, I'll read you here from the notes, if a person touches or stands on a grave, or even if he's under the same covering, such as the overhanging branches of a tree as a grave, he becomes tamei. Therefore, it was customary to mark graves by pouring lime over them. This served to warn people who had to remain tar, for example, those eating truma, to stay away. Apparently, there were bodies that were kind of randomly buried, not necessarily in a cemetery. Or maybe it was an unmarked cemetery, I don't know exactly. But it sounds like you had these graves that were left unmarked, and there was this public work that was done, and done by volunteers, for the community to go ahead and where these graves were to mark them. Now, these marking of the graves happens to be, they bring down here from the commentary of Tosfos, that it doesn't require a lot of work. It's not such a big deal. And the point here in this part of the Mishnah about these two examples we're about to have, which is Mitzainin es hakavaris, you can mark the graves, the Yotzin af al kilayim, and people can go out to find kilayim and to uproot them. Kilayim is a prohibition to have different plants, different forms of produce growing together. And not only is it forbidden to grow them, but if they happen to have grown in your property, let's say a non-Jew planted them or someone or other they grew on their own, you have to uproot them. And what the community basin used to do, the rabbinical court used to do, is they sent out agents to go around and looking at people's fields to see if there was any kalayim. And if there was, they would uproot it. So the Mishnah says both these things, marking the graves and sending out the agents of the basin of the rabbinical court to be able to search for kalayim and to uproot it, both those can be done on Chol Hamoed. Now, the point here, what's unique about these cases is the following, and that is that even when we talk about things that are permitted to do on Chol Hamoed, you're not allowed to schedule it for Chol Hamoed. You can't say, oh, I'll leave it for Chol Hamoed. You can't schedule it for Chol Hamoed. Now, when we're talking about some of the things before repairs, right? Those aren't necessarily, not necessarily scheduled repairs. They're repairs, things that happen. Okay, we're not talking about scheduled repairs, but here we're talking about going out and marking the graves and going out looking for kalayim, right? You know, the kalayim part for sure is not a yontif need, right? But it's a public need, and you're set, and they have to be sent out to do it, right? You have to schedule it. You have to get these people and tell them when to do it. So the Mishnah is saying we do these things on Chol Hamoed. What do you mean? You're not supposed to schedule things specifically for Chol Hamoed. And the explanation is the following. The explanation is that these things. Just 1 second. Okay. The way they explain it here is like this. They say, regarding to the marking of the graves, a court may even schedule this task for Chol Hamoed because volunteers are available then to do the work. That's what they say about the graves. About the kalayim, they add another point. They don't just say because the volunteers are available. Regarding the kalayim, they add that kalayim, these people, these agents of the court that went out to look for the kalayim, they were paid from the Beis Hamikdash, from the Trumas Halishka. They were paid from the temple treasuries, from the Beis Hamikdash treasuries. Now, if you hire them to do it on Chol Hamoed, when they typically aren't working, right, you can get them for cheaper than during the rest of the year. During the rest of the year, if you want to get them to come and do this work, you're going to have to pay them X amount because it means giving up time that they can find work. But in Chol Hamoed, they can't work. And therefore, you'll be able to hire them for less. Since they were being hired from the funds of the Beis Hamikdash, so therefore, they said you can even schedule on Chol Hamoed so that we don't have to use, so that we can basically not have to spend the Beis Hamikdash's money when we don't need to. We can spend less. That's the better way to go. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.